Today's guest is Jane Cicchetti, a homeopath and Jungian analyst with over 35 years' experience. Jane has managed to integrate classical homeopathy with Jungian psychology, which has helped her to open the door to the world of dreams and symbols, which are the language of the psyche, an element that adds clarity to the core issues surrounding deep-seated problems and guides the way toward progress on the healing path. Jane's pioneering book, Dreams, Symbols, and Homeopathy, Archetypal Dimensions of Healing, is considered the classical work on this subject and is available both in English and German. You can learn more about Jane at www.janecicchetti.com, where you'll also find the link to purchase her book. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Homeopathy Hangout, where we discuss all things homeopathy from around the world. And now my mum and your host, Eugenie Kruger.
Hello, homies, and a very warm welcome to Homeopathy Hangout. Today, we have a very special guest, Jane Cicchetti. Welcome to the show, Jane.
Thank you so much, Eugenia.
It's so lovely.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. I've been so excited about today because I think we booked this quite a few months ago, right? And so I have had your book, Dreams, Symbols, and Homeopathy. I think it must be 10 years, Jane. Like, when did this book come out? Because I swear I've had it at least 10 years.
I wrote that book 20 years ago.
Oh, okay. Well, that would make sense.
That's really interesting, right? And now suddenly there's a lot of interest in it 20 years later.
Amazing.
Really, not that there wasn't interest in the beginning, but it seems like the world of homeopathy and the need of our clients is ready for all of this now.
I think after COVID maybe as well, there's so many people looking for deeper meaning and deeper soul answers. And I think your book is even landing better now, because I just think of when I read it 10 years ago as a new homeopath versus now, it's landing so much better for me. And I'm just like seeing the value of it so much more. But before we jump into all of that, because I'm really excited to get to talk about that, tell us a little bit about your journey into homeopathy, because you've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah. When I've been practicing homeopathy for almost 40 years now. And when I first started, there were no schools in the United States. So we had to we had visiting teachers coming in and all that. And I was fortunate enough to study with Francisco Aiziaga, who was coming here from Argentina at the time. And he was a really glorious, elegant Spanish man. And I learned a lot from him. And in a very different way, because he had a clinic in Buenos Aires and he used no antibiotics, even though he had hospital privileges. He had therapists working for him. He was a very high-powered doctor in Buenos Aires, doing only homeopathy. And that is really exciting to know somebody like that and to learn from somebody like that. I studied with other people, but he was one of the main people I studied with at first.
I've actually had his son on the podcast, and it was so amazing speaking with him, because I learned about Aiziaga at college, and then I heard that this Francisco Aiziaga is speaking at the conference, one of the homeopath, the national conference in America. And I'm like, what? He has a son and he practices homeopathy. And then it turned out he actually has a couple of sons that are homeopaths as well. I think a couple of their children are homeopaths. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so cool. But what a man we have studied from. Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember him mentioning his sons were working in the clinic for him. He used to say, I always give him the kids. That was a long time ago. I'm sure they're master homeopaths on their own.
They really are. But how did you find homeopathy? Do you recall how you found it or how you discovered it?
It's a very funny story. I'll tell it to you. A friend of mine was being treated with homeopathy by James Stevenson. I don't know if you've even heard of him. He died many, many years ago. He was a New York doctor, homeopath. And she sort of convinced me to go to him. And as soon as I touched the world of homeopathy, it just grabbed me and it wouldn't let me go. And as I said then, it was hard to find schools or everything. So actually, the first studying that I did was I read Kent's repertory all the way through.
Wow, that's a hard one.
and Borchi's Materia Medica. And what I thought when I saw even the repertory, these aggravated from alcohol or sleep can't sleep at 3 a.m. I thought, oh my God, this is a listing of the variety of human suffering and the fact that we have remedies for it. And I was overwhelmed by it. So I got a little remedy kit, and a funny thing started happening. Cats started showing up in my backyard, and they were in all kinds of terrible shape. I became the queen of bite wound injuries. I think they talked to each other. So all these feral cats would come. And so I would come to the door in the morning, okay, what's wrong with you? And I would treat all these cats. So my first patients were cats.
That is so cute. Oh my goodness.
I think when we're meant to do something, the world responds, and the world responds pretty obviously. We can't really get away from it. I bet a lot of people have stories like that about homeopathy.
I love listening to people's stories of how they discovered homeopathy. And I think one day I want to put together a book just of my guests' stories of how they found homeopathy, because that in itself, Camilla Scher's story, I think, was one of the top for me, because she found homeopathy in a bar. That was a great story.
We confess to you.
Jane, I've noticed a bit of a trend with homeopaths who have been practicing for several decades. Many of them, somewhere along the lines, discover Jungian psychology of Carl Jung. I know Ian Watson talks about it quite a lot, and I think it was Richard Pitt or maybe there's been a few homeopaths that I've interviewed, and Carl Jung's name keeps coming up. And I am so intrigued by it. I started listening to this podcast called The Jungian Life, or That Jungian Life, or something like that. So now and again, I'll listen to some episodes. Oh. It's always fascinated me, and his name keeps on coming up on my radar. And so I'm like, I really have to delve into this. And actually, one of my friends' mother-in-law is a Jungian psychologist in South Africa. And so his name just comes up everywhere. But how did you discover him, and how did you then figure out to integrate this with homeopathy? Because I think that it goes along so beautifully.
I've always been interested in psychology from very young age, way before I got involved in homeopathy. And I was especially interested in Jungian psychology. So I knew about it all that time. So I had that sort of in the back of my head. But what happened is I'd been practicing after the cat story and all of that. I eventually studied with Ayaga and some other people. And then I opened up my own holistic health center, and I became quite busy. So I'd been practicing about 10 years at that point. And it was the kind of practice where I had a secretary, and so people would come in one after another. Started realizing, oh, there's something wrong here with me. The way that I'm relating to people, this is becoming like a conveyor. I mean, it's like I'm not deeply connecting with people. I'm being superficial, and I knew there was more to it. As I said, I was familiar with psychology to start with, and I said something has to improve in me. And I knew that in psychology, a lot of psychologists have supervision, formal supervision, so that they can make sure that they're doing the very best for their clients and not unloading a lot of their own stuff on the clients and all that. And I knew I wanted a Jungian analyst as my supervisor, because Jungian psychology has a very formal system of supervision, and it's called a training analysis. So you actually go through an analysis with a senior analyst for however long you have to do it. And that really improves your relationship to your patients. So anyway, I found, by some very amazing coincidences or synchronistic events, I found a training analyst who was willing to take me on as a trainee. And his name was Dr. Walter Odeinik. He passed away about 10 years ago. But the great thing about him was his training analysts were Marie-Louise von Franz and Edward Edinger. I always mention that because I like the idea of lineage. And Edinger and von Franz were very close to Jung. So anyway, I spent 10 years with Walter in my analysis. And I just want to mention one thing about that is once you do a training analysis, you can understand Jungian psychology better. You understand the dynamics of the patient-client relationship and all of that. But it's just the beginning. In martial art, they have a saying, when you get your black belt, then you can start.
That's how I feel with homeopathy though. Yeah, as well. Like the training is almost like nothing. It's just like actually when you like start practicing, when you're qualified, that's actually when the training starts.
Yes. So after 10 years of being in this training analysis, that was a long time ago, but it's a never ending journey. Development, study, sharing, but journaling my own dreams, working with dreams, all of that. It's just ongoing. Or maybe I was just a tough case. I don't know.
I think that's why we come on to like incarnate into this lifetime, right? It's just to learn. And so if you're not like constantly learning and constantly evolving and asking questions and what's the point?
I feel that way. Anyway, what happened was during that time when I was working with Walter, both Edward Edinger and Marie-Louise von Franz passed away. And I thought, oh my goodness, what's happening is we're losing the lineage. And if I don't share what I've learned, being in this really fortunate situation, if I don't share that, if I don't write a book about it, it's going to get lost. Because there are not that many opportunities to study with that level, they have first generation of Jungian analysts. Anyway, so I wrote the book. And as I said to you earlier, that was 20 years ago that I wrote the book. And it got very good reviews and people really, I think, benefited from it. But now there's even more interest in this book. So the time is right.
It's amazing. I wonder, can you maybe tell our listeners a little bit more about the book? Because I actually got so much information. You talk about archetypes and all that sort of stuff, but there's a lot of like mythology. I love the Lysenum story, like the way that you're using stories and archetypes and mythology and all that. It really helps you to understand a remedy. I love the story that you were telling about.
The symbolic material.
Yeah. And was it Cerberus or who was it that dropped the tear onto, Cerberus that had one of his tears dropped onto the earth, and aconite was the first plant that
came up.
grew.
Yes.
And I feel it's easier. I think we, as humans, we instinctively learn via stories because that's how information was transferred through the eons. And so when you have a great story attached, and when you talk about, that split and how like Lysenum, they have to go like through the dark side to get to the other side. Lysenum is a remedy we often prescribe for complex children like ADHD and specifically autism and lots of like wild kids. And so to understand like this story kind of behind it and what they have to go through, it makes you understand the patient a bit better and what it is and their soul's journey, like what it is that they have to learn in this lifetime to go through. And it makes you, instead of just looking at that behavior and going, that's a naughty child, they're being destructive, you can actually understand their soul's journey of why they're doing what they're doing. So you're seeing it in such a more holistic, understanding, empathic way when you're looking at it from that perspective.
The book, if you notice, each chapter I have an alchemical drawing. And relating that to what you just said about the soul's journey, the alchemists were, of course, we think of them as turning base metal into gold, but it was also there were some alchemists who were really involved in their own development, their own spiritual growth. So the creation of the Philosopher's Stone is really the individuation process. So in my book, I actually include those pictures. Most of them are from the Rosarium series, which shows that process. And many, many years ago, I think it was at some international conference in the United States, I did a lecture on the Rosarium pictures and the healing process. Just briefly, though, it starts out with the alchemical fountain. And what that represents is the fact that everything is there. Like when we look at a case, everything is there, but it's in chaos. And And so the process we go through is to, just as a homeopath, this is looking at the red line that runs through the case and everything. We try to help the person, put them in the alchemical cauldron, so to speak, and allow that all to cook. And then they go through processes, and some of the processes are not all that happy. Some of the processes are the dark night of the soul. The alchemists called that the negrito. And there's a great alchemical woodcut of the alchemist sitting in a hole with a crow on his head. Right? That's something that I always refer my clients to, that picture. It's not just you.
You're not alone.
Yeah, because, and we'll maybe talk about this later, because the ego relationship to the self, or the more holistic aspect of the person, has to break down. It can't stay the way it is. And even if people don't come to us for that, for most people, if they want to deeply heal, they have to go through it. We talk about aggravation from a remedy. Okay, we know about that. But this is something much more profound than that. As I said, the whole ego structure has to change. And this is not just in homeopathy. This is in any form of healing. With children, I don't see children going through that. I no longer work with children because my processes are just they don't relate to childhood. But I think that one of the difficulties in treating children is children are actually living on the projection of their parents. So it's most of the time, it's the parents that need to be treated. And no parent wants to hear that when they've coming or have enough problems with their kids and all that. And they say, but ultimately in these deep problems, it's the parents that need to be treated. And there's a story of Jung actually working with a man who had a little boy, and he was able to find the issue in the man through the dreams of the son, because the son was actually absorbing the neuroses of the father. So that's how close children are to their parents, whether they're close in terms of a loving relationship or not. They are psychically committed to that person for a certain period of time. And even, I think we all know this, even when we grow up, we still have those parents inside of us to some extent, even if they're long gone.
Yeah.
It's quite tricky. But anyway, talking about the healing process. And then the other thing I'd like to say about the book is the symbolic materia medica. I was very wary of talking about this because remember, this was 20 years ago. People were not writing symbolic materia medica at that point. A few people were, but not so much and not so completely, and not relating it to myth and all of that. So I got some flack for writing that, actually.
I can imagine. I was about to ask you. I can imagine. Homeopaths don't like things changing. I've noticed that a lot with this podcast, especially. People are like quite resistant, whereas actually Hahnemann himself was so innovative and always changing things up and exploring. And so I can imagine you had a bit of pushback.
Yeah, I did. And there's an interesting, you can find it because I've posted a lot of these old articles on my website. And there's one that's an interview with Barbara Ozawa. Barbara really took umbrage on she goes, what the hell is symbolic materia medica? And so we had some emails back and forth. And I said, why don't we have a conversation about that in public? Why don't we publish it? And so that's on my website. I think it's called An Interview with Barbara Ozawa. And in it, I'm very clear about how I stand on symbolic materia medica. It is an adjunct to our understanding of materia medica. I do not prescribe completely. Sometimes that's all you've got. It's an adjunct. It's another piece. It's another facet of the jewel of a remedy. And I make that very clear because people start going off. I guess they still do that to something. Oh, that person looks like a cat, so you gave them a cat. And I think, no, really, that's a very oversimplistic way of looking at symbolic materia medica. As I say, it's an adjunct, and it also has to fit in to the whole case, pathology and everything. I'm a great believer in repertorization. I think that we have to take the pathology into account and question, how does the pathology fit into the symbolism of the remedy? I mean, that's such an interesting question, right? Homeopathy is continually fascinating and continually complex. And so to say it's one way or another, oh, it has to be just provings before 1900 or something like that. Or, oh, it's only symbolism or only because the person looks a particular way. It's none of those things. It's all of those things. It's all of those things. And I think because people have become so much more complex psychologically, we need new remedies and we need a new view of remedies. I remember asking my mentor, Walter Odeinik, I said, I have a question for you that's related. It's homeopathic, but it's related to Jungian psychology. I said, it used to be that we could treat most people with 25 to 100 remedies. But now it's much more, we need all of these different remedies and everything. And what he said was that people used to belong to groups. In other words, if you were, say, Presbyterian or something, and you lived in a family and you lived in one place, that whole group of people would have a similar psychic buildup. They would be similar. But now, that was just an example, but we had groups of people like that, people who were really much more, in a sense, group consciousness, much more conforming.
Like a hive.
Now, things have broken apart, and the numinous or transcendent connection that people have to religions and culture have been lost, and people are looking for it within themselves, or they've lost it completely, which is something maybe we'll talk about later. This loss of connection to the numinous is probably one of the biggest aspects of Jungian psychology. This is what Jung said. This is why people are sick. He said, because they have lost a connection to the source. Now, interestingly, Hahnemann said something similar. Can you recall that, what it is?
Probably not as well as how you would.
It's my interpretation of it. When he first started practicing, right, he was treating each person individually, and then he developed his theory of miasms. But what he talked about as the primary miasm, Sora, he said, people got sick because they became out of tune with the laws of nature. To me, that's very similar to losing the numinous. Now, I don't know exactly. Hahnemann was very tricky that way. He never really told us exactly what he meant by these things. But that's my interpretation of it. That Sora and this idea of being disconnected from the numinous that Jung talks about are a very similar thing.
Unrooted and not grounded and sort of.
Right.
Yeah, not feeling grounded and rooted, I think. I think that there's so many factors to that. I've never considered it from that aspect that you've just mentioned. I've just considered that we are getting more complex because there is with Wi-Fi and all the radiation, the 5G and the foods and the sprays and all the vaccines and everything else that they're doing to us. But I really resonate with what you have said about the kind of like that loss of community, because so many of us, like myself included, are living in different countries, so away from where our culture is. And my husband and I often have these conversations because he's from South Africa as well. that, we're so privileged to be living here in Australia, but it's really hard for us to find our tribe. Like, you make friends from people with different culture, but there's always that's something that's slightly missing, because there's this unspoken thing when you come from a certain culture that when you're with somebody from that culture, you don't have to explain certain things. They just get it and understand it. And that gives you that sense of like really strong community. And so I'd say 90% of my clients I see are actually different parts of the world, or even different parts of Australia. Their family is actually on the East Coast, but they're over here. And we often are not rooted in that religion or the groups or that sort of stuff. So yeah, I never have thought about it from that point of view. And that's why we're more complex to treat. I think that actually plays quite a big part of it, on top of all the sprays and the vaccines and the medications and the suppression with antidepressants. I had a client just this week who has been on antidepressants since she was 11 years old. So I think our actual psyche is being suppressed by all these drugs from such a young age as well. So it is really complex.
Yeah, oh, yes, that's of course true. Absolutely. And this is one of the reasons why understanding the symbolic world of the patient is really important, and understanding and being able to understand their dreams, or to actually utilize their dreams, because so much is suppressed. Not only so much is lost, but so much is suppressed. And we suppress everything these days. If we don't use drugs, we're doing it by suppressing ourselves. And it amazes me as I do my own work and I listen to my dreams and everything, how much of who I really has been suppressed by me. And also the unique situation of women these days too, moving from being totally within a certain box or container to striking out on our own. And I think that's really important, because I think women are really the woman's point of view, the feminine point of view, or eros, as we talk about in Jungian psychology, is really important, because eros is the connective principle. It's the thing that connects people together, that connects everything together, that sees the whole picture. Whereas the male, and I'm talking about an archetypal format, the male is the separatio that separates things into pieces. And we need both. We absolutely need both. But because we have a history of things being separated, so much logos, so much rational thinking, that we need the wisdom of eros and the connective principle of eros. So I think that women we are not separate. We are not separate from the external energies of the archetypes.
I was going to ask you if you can tell us a little bit more about the archetypes. How many different archetypes are there, and can you give us like a little bit of an overview of them?
Yeah. Archetypes are basically preconditions, primordial energies, and they're invisible. They're potential. And then when they are stimulated, and they make up what Jung called the collective unconscious. I think I have to back up a little bit and talk about the collective unconscious, if you don't mind, is that this is another big difference in Jungian psychology. Jung was a psychiatrist. He was working in a mental hospital. This was in his early years. And he discovered that these people who were locked away, who knew nothing about what was going on in the world, were having dreams that were mythological motifs, that were things that they knew nothing about. And he observed this. Like Kahneman, he was very big in observing. Being the unprejudiced observer, I'm sure Jung would have used that word, the same thing. So he observed this, and he continued to observe it. And through observing it, he not only helped people heal, but he realized that our psyche is not just contained within the individual. It's actually collective. And what makes up that collective unconscious are these energies, these primordial potentials, invisible. And they are unlimited. There are unlimited number of them. And then when they are stimulated, we experience the archetypes. Human beings experience the archetype through symbols. Then they become archetypal symbols, but those are not the archetypes themselves. The archetypes themselves are these invisible energy forms. So, I think this whole thing is much more like physics. It's amazing. It's all this energy field that is described in quantum physics. So anyway, that's what archetypes are. Now, even though there are a very, unlimited number of archetypes, there are archetypes that show up again and again in clinical practice. And the archetype of the shadow, the dual archetype of the anima and animus, which I touched on a little bit, that we all have this masculine, feminine polarity. And the archetype of the mother, which we see a lot in homeopathic practice, because the archetype of the mother has a lot to do with autoimmune diseases, all kinds of problems in the physical body, addictions, eating disorders. All of those things are the mother archetype. But the first archetype that is really important to look at as a homeopath and as an individual is the archetype of the shadow. And so what is the archetype of the shadow? The archetype of the shadow is all of the things that we don't want to see in ourselves, all the negativity, all of that. And because the shadow naturally is hidden and people don't want to show it to you, don't think that they're going to tell you about the shadow in your practice necessarily, right? So one of the big problems, I think if homeopath got anything from my book and listening to this podcast, is be careful not to prescribe on what we call the mask or the persona of the individual. That's what covers over the shadow. Edward Whitman talked about this very nicely. He said this woman who had been to many homeopaths before him, and she was very sweet, very nice, and they all gave her pulsatilla because they were prescribing on this mask, on this persona. This is who she wanted them to think she was. Whitman gave her Leptodectrus mactans, black widow spider, and it cured her.
I've heard a similar story of a homeopath's son who had been to like every single homeopath and they gave him all the macho remedies. And then my lecturer gave him pulsatilla and that cured him. So it's a strong, big rugby player. And it's very interesting, right? Yeah.
Yeah, pulsatilla in men that's a whole interesting story as it is. I see this as one of the main issues with pulsatilla in men that I see is a confusion about their sexuality.
Interesting.
And actually, if you look under pulsatilla in Ken's repertory, you'll see that.
And it's such a big remedy for fear of men as well, which is really, interesting.
Yes. Fear of men, fear of women. Yes.
Interesting. What other archetypes are there? Because you've got, and I mean, the mother and autoimmune makes sense because when you've lost that connection, that mothering, nurturing connection, it makes sense that would play a role in autoimmune and so many other things.
Right,
and
right. So,
seeing explosion of autoimmune as people are becoming more and more disconnected. Very interesting.
Yeah. But the thing is that I'll get back to the shadow because really there are not that many archetypes that you'll see continually in practice. There could be any number, the wise old man, all of these things. But I just see the shadow and the mother, the anima and the animus as being what the nuts and bolts of practice. You'll see it in dreams. You'll see it in the healing process, all of that. So one of the things that I want to talk about is the fact that there's an individual shadow and there's a collective shadow. And the collective shadow is when whole groups of people or societies of people or the whole world don't process their own shadow. That material then, just like the individual shadow can get projected out onto our clients or whatever, the projection of the collective shadow projects from one group to another. And so then you have things like wars, conflicts, political strife. It's a really dangerous situation. And we're not in such a good situation right now in the world. And part of that is, from a Jungian point of view, we can say it's the collective shadow. People think that you can solve all of these problems by social reform. And I agree, those things are very helpful. But really, the collective shadow is treated one person at a time, looking at their own shadow. And this is, from my point of view, what if homeopaths understand this, they can really help people to contribute to cleansing the world's shadow, to making it, actually it doesn't, it's not cleansing, you become aware of it. And it's awareness that brings it out of the shadow, which is the dark, into the light. Things that are in the shadow have this sort of, when they're projected out, they have this sort of primitive, dark quality to them. And we see that a lot. I'm not going to talk about some of the political situations that we have, but you can, I think all you have to do is read the news and you can see that there are people who are in very high positions in the world who are projecting their shadow out big time.
Do you ever think we'll get to a place where there's no shadows and we're completely healed? Because you know how you have to have the yin and the yang, the light and the dark. So I sometimes think about this. Will we ever get to a place where as a human race, we will be completely healed? But I can't see that ever happening because you do need the light and the dark. So
we need the light and the dark. And I don't know about being completely healed that way. I just don't look at things quite like that. But what happens is it's not that the dark goes away necessarily. There needs to be the dark and the light. There's the polarity. Every archetype has a polarity, a dark side and a light side, no matter what it is. However, what we have is awareness looking at it. And so we might still have our shadow material, but if we have awareness to it, it works differently. Whitman, again, he said some great things about this. He said, when we're aware of our shadow, it potentizes it. So it actually becomes like a remedy. And that's that whole thing, like with the shaman, right? Who has all of these, the wounded warrior and all of that. He or she has potentized their dark energy, potentized their wounding, and then it becomes a remedy.
Beautiful.
But I don't think there's any end to this whole business. Polarity is interesting. If you read some creation dreams, and I'm sure there in Australia you have some beautiful creation dreams, creation myths.
Dreamtime stories, I think they're called over here.
Yeah. But it's always that in the beginning there was nothing, there was wholeness, and then it splits in two, and that's the polarity. That's in every tradition. So in order to have relative life, we have to have those polarities. I agree with you completely. Would like to say that there are a couple of ways that homeopaths can see the shadow.
Yes, tell us about that.
Yeah. So one is if you see a person and they have a mask-like face. Have you seen clients like that?
I'm going to specifically look out for that now. So you don't mean like physically, they have a mask-like face.
Yes, in other words, the face doesn't move and they haven't it's not Botox.
Not Botox.
But the face doesn't move. And I think that has a lot to do with the connection between the deeper parts of the brain and the nervous system. But anyway, that we don't really need to know that. All we need to know is that this mask-like face, you have to think, there's something going on here. So that's one thing. Another thing is if the person says everything is just fine, I don't have any problems at all. And, and their father was a serial killer or something, So you see this terrible childhood and the person is all okay. Unless this person has done a tremendous amount of work on themselves, I don't buy that. I think it's in the shadow.
I have a saying in my clinic, I'm not happy until somebody's cried, preferably the client and not me. I've cried twice in clinic, actually, twice, when the story, somebody's child being taken away from them. And, when I don't see a tear in I always say to the client, if the tears come up, I'm like, that is where we need to heal. And so they'll talk about something with a straight face, and then they'll say something, or I'll ask them a question, then the tears come. And it doesn't have to fully even come up, but you can see the eyes water. And then I know that's their soul talking to me. That's where the healing needs to happen. And some clients, when they've had a whole consult talking in a straight face, I'm like, I don't just think to myself, it's okay. They're just not ready to go there yet, but we'll give them those remedies and we'll just work with those layers as they come up. But
Asiaga, who was not into psychology so much, or at least not in his practice, he used to say, if you feel like you're falling asleep or bored when a person is talking, it's either that they have a very deep miasm, probably like a syphilitic miasm, or they're not telling the truth. They're not being authentic. Because when we speak to one another, like we're speaking now in an authentic way, a beautiful energy in that. Even if the client is speaking about something that's very sad, but if you feel, oh God, it means that they're talking trash to you. Trash in terms of what's useful for the homeopathic analysis. Let's see. Also, people who have everything is fine, but they have continual violent dreams or dark dreams. We look at the dreams, what is that? Although very often people with a very deep, repressed shadow energy will not remember their dreams. And it's really important, this is resistance, and it's really important to respect that resistance because it's there for a reason. And we don't come in with a sledgehammer and try to break through it. I once did a first consultation. I'll never forget this guy. It was many years ago. A man who really didn't want to tell me anything about himself. And it felt like he really didn't want to be there anyway. But he had this dream, and it was a repetitive dream, and that he would walk up to a cave, and the cave was covered, the opening of the cave was completely covered by this huge spider. Well, I can't tell you more about the case because the man never came back to me. But this is a dream that says there's a lot to deal with, a lot that can't be uncovered at this point. So I think it's really important to respect that.
It can be tricky as well because sometimes you just don't, I have had a handful of times where I've given a remedy to a client and then I haven't seen them for 2 years or heard from them. And then they come back and then they say to me, after you gave me that remedy, it unleashed all this stuff and I had to deal with it and process it and I wasn't ready to come back. And then they come back and they're actually so grateful for that experience. But when you're in it, it's sad because I wish they just reached out to me, but I'm also respectful of the fact that they had their own healing journey. And I feel like sometimes as homeopaths, we are a small part of that person's healing journey. And sometimes we're a larger part of that healing journey. And we have to respect the role that we play in their healing journey. But that has happened. And I know Colin Griffith in his Master Practitioner course that I'm often talks about syphilinum. You have to be a little bit careful when you go in with that syphilinum because it'll open up stuff that doesn't necessarily want to be open. So you have to gently go in there when you're opening things. And I've often said, and this is also why I've started this podcast, is I want people to understand the power of homeopathy. And I sometimes think maybe I don't want to tell a client too much because they've just come in for the wart on their toe. So maybe they don't know that the remedy I'm going to give them is actually going to help them heal that childhood trauma that they've suppressed for so long.
Right.
Sometimes I think maybe I should warn them that might happen, and sometimes I should just stay quiet because otherwise they might not come and see me if they actually knew that this water is going to unleash. And we do that gently and respectfully. So don't be scared to go and see your homeopath, but just know that you're probably going to get a deeper healing than just that wart.
Yeah. That's something that I've worked with a lot, that the client's expectation. I actually, a couple of years ago, I completely redid my website. And so if anybody looks at my website, they know what to expect. So I have a little bit of an advantage there. And then I also talk to people before the first consultation, if they don't really know what's going on.
I think sometimes they think you can prepare them and they might think that they know, but they don't really know until they've taken that correct remedy. And it's not something you can really explain. No amount of explaining can really tell you what homeopathy will do for you. You have to experience it. And I say that to my clients sometimes, like this and this might happen, but really I can't really explain it to you. You just have to take it and just experience it. And then it's not in it's in the knowing, it's in the taking, it's in the experiencing it that you understand what homeopathy is really all about.
Yeah, that's why I think it's also so important. Maybe this doesn't happen now, but I know plenty of homeopaths of my generation who were never treated never had really good homeopathic treatment. And you really do the homeopath has to understand it themselves also.
And experience.
Has to have gone through it. Because there's a point, this whole thing of the negrito and breaking down of the ego, that part, if that happens, no matter how much you even heard about it, it doesn't matter who you are, you're going to lose it. It's going to be difficult. And the homeopath's responsibility is to, if the client stays with you through that, to know and to, as I say, show them the pictures. It's not just you.
Absolutely. And
this is what's happening.
And you can always feel you can only help a client as far as your own personal development. And so if you're not working on yourself and looking at your own shadows, you can't really help your clients. It's all experiential. You need to have been there and done that. And then you can take them through that. You can't heal them from a place that you haven't been yourself.
Yeah. I think there are all kinds of clients and people coming for homeopathy and all kinds of homeopaths. And I think there's room for all of it.
100%.
Absolutely room for all of it. Many years ago, I taught in a hospital and I taught doctors how to use homeopathy. But what did I teach them? Hypericum, arnica, pre and post-op stuff, right? And that's beautiful homeopathy. That's wonderful. It saves so much suffering. And there are people who even come to me. Usually they not so much anymore, and very often they leave. But expecting that kind of symptomatic treatment. And it just means that they're with the wrong homeopath.
I talk about that so often on here, like finding the right practitioner. And sometimes you won't know until you've had that consultation. That's what it's like with any other practitioner. Like you might go to a chiropractor or MD or whoever, psychologist, and then after a while realize that's not actually the right resonance for you. But you learn from that also what's not right for you. I think of like when I was a teenager and trying to find clothes that fit my body, and I'll keep buying the wrong stuff. And then eventually I'm like, no, Eugenie, that's not the type of clothes that fit you. This is the type of stuff that you need to wear. And then you learn your lesson after a while. And so you learn with any experience in life as much about what works for you as what doesn't work for you. You can always learn something from the positive and the negative. Is there anything that you want to mention about that? Because I really want to pick your brains on dreams as well, but I just want to make sure that if there's anything else that you want to say about the shadow side.
But about the shadow? No, I think I've talked pretty much about that. You're going to talk about dreams?
I would love if you can talk about dreams because I'm a dreamer.
So I'm going to do a really fast go through about dreams.
Well, you can make it slow. We've got time.
Oh, okay.
Don't skimp on the dream details. I really want to learn more about that.
Yeah. So actually, the important thing to know about dreams, couple things. One is dreams are real events. What does that mean? Does that mean that they're walking across your desk? No, it doesn't mean that. It means that everything in the dreams is important and vital. So if you dream about a pink elephant with red dots, that's what it is. Pink elephant, red dots. And you don't sort of say, well, so you dreamt about an elephant. No, you dreamt about pink elephant with red dots. And Jung talked about that. He says that everything in the dream is real, needs to be really looked at. So that's number one. And we don't want to hear a snippet of a dream. We want to hear the whole dream. Telling of the dream is a really important part of it. A lot of times, my clients, I've trained them, they'll send me the dream. on email before their appointment. So I don't have to write it down the whole time. If they don't do that, I write it down. I write the whole thing down. But to save us some time, they'll send it. And then they want me to just read it and tell them what it means or something like that. And no, you've got to tell me the dream. Telling the dream is an important part. So the person, even if they've sent you a copy of the dream, they need to tell you the dream. So many times what they tell you is different than what they wrote down.
Interesting.
Yeah, it really is interesting. And then the other part, because people are really concerned, and also talk about flack, getting flack. One of the big pieces of flack that I've gotten is, you're interpreting, you're making this up. This is not valid homeopathy. This is not valid case taking. In a way, that's right, because we don't interpret the dream. We ask the person what the elephant means, what the pink means, what the red dot means. So it's what the person thinks of the dream that's important. Mm. Now, there are also archetypal symbols that are in dreams, and that's something that people can look at, or I can help people. I have different books that have many meanings for one archetype, like elephant.
So many clients dream of snakes and teeth falling out are probably the two that I hear about the most.
Oh, yes. A lot of people dream about snakes. Yeah. The question is, what does it mean? What is the color of this? What does the snake look like? Because usually, here's what happens in a primitive case station, right? Oh, I had a dream of snakes. Okay. And I take out my dream book and look at it. That's not useful at all. That's not useful at all. What does the snake mean to the client? What color is the snake? Was there anything else there with the snake? How large was the snake? Dreams are real. We want to know exactly what happened in that dreamscape, exactly what the size of things were, what the feeling was to the client. So in a sense, we're not analyzing the dream at all. We're actually asking the client. Then it becomes very useful material. So that's the essence of Jungian dream analysis. This is the way Jungians work with dreams. There's sort of an elaboration of more understanding of the archetypal realm, but that's not really even necessary. What's really important is what the person thinks of the dream and exactly what's going on in all parts of the dream. If you do that, you won't go wrong. I assure you, you won't.
I have to ask you something else that I thought was such a good point you made in your book, was using dreams when we're doing provings, and the distinction that needs to be made that you need to check with a prover if this is a theme that they generally have anyway, or is this something completely new to them? And that is something I've never heard mentioned ever in the homeopathic world before, because we just use dreams when we're doing provings and we just put that as part of the proving notes. But I've never heard it mentioned that this is something that we need to really look at and ask the person beforehand, what are your dreams normally like, before we include that in the material or the proving notes.
This is something I put a lot of thought into, and it's probably the leading edge of my work right now, is how to deal with the many dreams that come out in provings. And actually, people who develop repertories have asked me that question. How do you do it? I've really thought about it. So the way that I mentioned it in my book is absolutely valid. How do we know what's the dream of the substance and what's the dream of the individual? So when I did some proving myself, I did the proving of the remedy peridot, which is a gemstone. Uh-huh. And I set it up so that we would talk to the provers about dreams, first of all, beforehand. That did not work very well. First of all, it was very, very time consuming, and most of the supervisors didn't know how to do it, well enough. And it just, that wasn't working. So, okay, so that's number one try. That didn't work. But eventually, I developed a system of working with dreams where that sorts itself out. And the way that I've done that is, and I've developed, it's a very long and complicated process, and one that you can actually see. I wrote an article for Homeopathy.com. It's on it, and it's called Dreams Improvings, and it has some kind of fancy title, but basically it goes through the whole process of how you do it. But to solve this problem of what is the dream of the substance and what is the dream of the individual, what I did is I went through all of the dreams and sorted out not the themes, but the imagery that appeared again and again in all of it is through many provers. And that way you could actually find out what the psyche is actually saying. And it was absolutely fascinating. I did the proving of Monotropa uniflora. Mm-hmm. This is not in my book.
No, I just thought, because there's a section here, the mind and the dream symptoms. I was wondering if that's maybe what you're talking about, but this is... Yeah.
No. This is, I developed in the last 5 years.
Okay.
Last 10 years. So anyway, I did Misha Norland had done a proving Monotropa uniflora, and he knew I was doing this process because I had already done another dream. I'd done Pele's hair, which was fascinating proving. I had done the dream proving analysis. And anyway, so Misha gave me that. And Misha was a very dear friend of mine. But I wondered about his friendship because the proving had over 200 dreams.
Oh, wow.
But what came out was really fascinating. It turned out that the dreams were saying through the imagery and through the imagery that repeated in many dreams was that it was a remedy for spiritual emergencies. This is what the dream proving said, that it was about interspecies contamination and injuries from vaccination.
Very interesting.
Very interesting. And there were so many images of half human, half animal. So getting back to your question is the dreams that had nothing to do with this major imagery fell out. Mm-hmm. They were maybe they were part of the substance. Maybe they were just the individual's dream, but it really didn't matter because the significant information was the information that repeated, the imagery that repeated again and again, which is different than just talking about the themes. There's a big and really subtle difference in that. So anyway, it was a really fascinating process and one that I'm developing and I hope we'll be able to integrate into homeopathy. But just like I said earlier, that the symbolic aspect of a remedy does not erase the other information that we have for a remedy. So in a dream proving, my suggestion is that the dream analysis goes with the proving, but doesn't override any of the proving, including the initial listing of dreams. Nothing gets overridden. Nothing gets lost. This is an adjunct. And maybe as looking at proving is very difficult to move in from proving to clinical practice. But for some people, maybe they'll see a case where the remedy is very clear from the dream proving. And that's valid. Because a lot of times we don't get a lot of physical symptoms in provings anymore because we don't do provings with toxic substances and very low potencies. We don't do that. Early provings were done that way. They were done with physical substances and poisonings. We don't poison people these days. So anyway, so that's just part of it. So if people want to see that proving of Monotropa uniflora, they can go to the School of Homeopathy website, their proving section, and look up Monotropa uniflora. And they'll see the whole proving, and then there's an appendix, and in the appendix is my dream analysis of those 200 dreams.
I'm fascinated by that now, Jane, because I have had monotropa come up so many times in repertorization when I use my Radar Opus software. And this is a thing I try not to do, but I do it anyway sometimes. I have my favorite remedies that I know are the ones that I always get good results with. And so even though monotropa has come up so many times, every time it comes up and I see mono and I'm like, what is that? And then I double click on it in Radar Opus and it gives me a bit of information. I'm like, okay, but I don't understand the remedy. But I've just Googled it while you were talking and the picture has come up and I feel like that's just been burned in my mind now. It's also called, I've always seen it called Indian pipe. But now seeing the picture, it's also called the ghost plant. And it is fascinating. And you can see why that imagery has come up. It's such an incredible plant. And I'm definitely going to go and read up on that because it's come up so many times. And I just need to go and learn about this remedy and because it's come up. Like I said, and I just haven't used it. Yes, please, because I just haven't really understood the remedy or known how to use it. But now I feel it's at the front of my consciousness and I have to go and read up and find out a bit more about this now.
And I want to tell you another part of it that was really interesting to me. So this comes out, it doesn't come out in the dream, in the proving itself. It comes out from the imagery in the dream through the dream analysis, right? This whole idea of spiritual emergency. Then I talked to a friend of mine who's an herbalist. We've got lots of herbalists here where I live. And I said, you ever use ghost pipe as a remedy? He goes, yeah, we don't use it that much because it could be endangered and all of that. He said, but I always have it with me when I go to these events like the Rainbow Gathering and stuff. That's where people do a lot of things like Burning Man and people are doing a lot of drugs and stuff. Anyway, he said, because when I'm at the emergency desk, if a person is having a drug problem and they can't get out of it, I give them ghost pipe.
Wow. That is
so we have to listen to the psyche. It's very accurate. It tells us a tremendous amount about substance if we have the ears to hear and the eyes to see clearly. Not just skimming over it, going back to that principle, dreams are real, and what does it really mean? And then this other part of only using the dreams that somehow are connected with one another, this whole thing, because the psyche is not separate, as Jung says, right? We belong to a collective psyche. When we do a proving, we have actually decided to all tap into the collective psyche, to a collective psyche that has to do with the substance. Mm. And the more I do that, the more I really think that these plants, well, I'll just talk about the plant kingdom here. They are so alive and they speak to us. And how do they speak to us? They speak through us through the collective psyche.
I'm almost too scared to ask this, but I'm going to anyway. So I have a lot of dreams. I usually can't remember them in the morning. One of the provings I did, and I usually have pretty nice dreams, but it was quite a violent dream. I dreamed my cat had this hematoma and it burst open. It was blood spurting everywhere. And then my daughter that's right. And then my daughter the next day actually did hit her head and there was this blood spurting everywhere. It was a proving that we were doing. So I knew that dream was definitely to do with approving, but then also the physical manifestation of my daughter doing that. It was just really creepy. But my dreams usually are just what happened during the day. I might as well in my dream I might as well have just been awake and just doing stuff all day. So what does that say? I'm almost too scared to ask, but let's do it anyway.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll quote Whitman for this. He says, no matter what the dream is, no matter how mundane it is, we need to ask ourselves, why did the psyche or why did the dream maker choose that event? And another thing is, and I suggest that when people are going to be working with dreams with their clients, with homeopaths, is that they start journaling their dreams. And going through that same process that I talk, dreams are real, what does it actually mean, this kind of thing. Whatever time of day when you wake up in the morning is the best time because dreams can run away really fast.
Yeah, mine do that.
And the more you do that, the more your psyche is going to speak to you. Mm. The other thing is, I don't know you very well, but my sense is that this would work with you quite well, is we can have an intention. Okay, I'm having everyday dreams. Why is it? And can I have something else?
Yeah.
Intention, even the most esoteric dream work, lucid dreaming, dream yoga, all of that. You know what it starts with? Intention. May I have a dream that shows me wisdom. Whatever. They all have that. Dream incubation starts with a dream, with a very ancient technique. Goes back in Egypt, they had whole buildings just made for dream incubation. And the Asclepios of Hippocrates, they had areas of dream incubation. It's all intention. We call it intention. They probably called it prayer. But so the asking of this aspect of your psyche, the wisdom of your psyche, the dream maker within your psyche, to give you something is really powerful. I think that when we do provings, we're actually unconsciously doing that because we've already set up, we've already agreed, we're going to write everything down. We're going to set this time aside. It becomes a sacred space.
It does.
Because dreaming is, and the connection to dreaming, it is a sacred event. At least from my point of view.
Jane, I have so many more questions for you, but I wonder, can you maybe just tell our listeners a little bit about do you provide any courses? I know you've got your book is available. The link is through your website, but do you have any online courses or things that you offer if people want to learn more from you?
Well, the Australian Homeopathic Association has my course available. It's a great introductory course and it's available. You can just get it online anytime now. And next year, I'm going to be teaching a course about the 3 archetypes in practice, the anima animus, the mother archetype, and the shadow. I'm going to be talking about those in depth. That'll be a 3-class course.
Where are you doing that, though? So where can people do you have a newsletter? I just want to make sure.
Through their Australian Homeopathic Association.
Wow, interesting. The website is homeopathyOz.org. So people can just go there and sign up and then they will be notified.
You go there and you can, and then you're helping their legal status in Australia.
Oh, that's incredible. Wow. And
I have so much more to tell you, but
tell me. No, I've got more time. So anything else you want to share, go for it.
Yes. I want to share with you about this whole thing of the archetypes that dominate a particular time. And they actually, they create what we call like the zeitgeist or the spirit of the time, what it's like. So right now, we're really under the influence and have been for quite a long time. I sound like an astrologer, but of the archetype of the apocalypse. And about 30 years ago, Edward Edinger wrote a book called The Archetype of the Apocalypse for people who are interested in that, going into depth with that. But it's a time of great polarity, a huge polarity, a breakdown in society, a return to religious fundamentalism, just really a difficult time. But it's not all negative. The apocalypse, we talked earlier about this whole thing about the darkness that occurs when one has to really break things down in the healing process. So the archetype of the apocalypse is there to actually create a radical change that's needed. So we're actually in a time that we are being forced into radical change. So that's what's going on from that perspective. We just went through a terrible pandemic and all of that. And that was part of it because epidemics are part of that, the archetype of the apocalypse. During this time, I have friends in Europe. We were doing provings together and we did a reproving of the remedy. This is what I was getting to. We did a reproving of the remedy Frankincense. which is, you probably know this as Boswellia serrata, and it's also called olibanum.
Yes, olibanum. I've seen it in the repertories, olibanum.
Yeah. Sacra. And we took the different varieties of frankincense and proved all of them. Some people did one, some people did the other, and we compared it. They were all pretty much the same. Doing the proving, I had a dream, and the dream was, the words came out, heart of darkness. At the same time, a colleague of mine who is in the UK, the same week, walked into the bookstore and bought the book, Heart of Darkness. That's not like it was a bestseller. This was published in 1899, right?
Wow.
So you talked earlier about something happening in a proving outside. So that's this kind of synchronicity is because the psyche is universal. It's collective. It doesn't have boundaries. It's outside of time and space. So anyway, that was really interesting. And I started to look at some of the themes in that book. And it's about a white man from the UK who goes to Africa, the story. Mm-hmm. Anyway, it's about oppression and degradation of another group of people, the Africans, all of that. It's more than that too. But I didn't know this. It was actually the inspiration for the film Apocalypse Now.
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So there was a lot more in the proving. But it turns out that it's a very useful remedy for people who have trauma from having genocide in their family lineage. People who had family in the Holocaust or who were somehow connected to that, even if they didn't experience in their family. It's a big remedy for that. And I'll just tell you some of the themes that came out from this because it's an important remedy for the zeitgeist of the time. It's almost like a remedy epidemicus. And I don't mean so much like for a virus, although actually it's pretty for long. Well, anyway.
Like a genus epidemicus for the soul, for our souls at this time.
Yes. It's because the theme is about connection and disconnection. And people who take it and those of us who are the provers, I think we were connected in such a deep way. Even though we were all on Zoom, we were hundreds and hundreds of miles apart. There was just this enormous connection that was created through this remedy. And when I give it to people, this is what I see. People who have had a lifetime or generations of aversion to a particular group of people are now talking to those people.
It's very interesting because I'm just thinking of the one time that I've prescribed that was actually with a client who has an excessive connection with God. I know that sounds weird, but to the exclusion of not going out and making friends because all she does all day is pray to God.
Yeah.
And all the other physical symptoms fit her so beautifully as well. It was actually quite amazing. And I was just thinking, I haven't heard from her in a little while. Last thing I did, the physical symptoms were improving, but I haven't seen her in a while. And I think the remedy was pretty spot on. So I'm looking forward to hearing back from her. But because in every remedy, you're going to see that polarity, right? Like we're trying to give you that more connection. But then when it's gone too far and the connection with the spiritual realm is to the exclusion of other humans and making connections with people, then it's the same energy but expressing differently.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Helene Renaud gave olibanum to this is a beautiful case of autism. Two cases of autism in young boys cured with olibanum.
Beautiful. It's actually interesting because this lady also treating her son who has autism. And he is completely not wanting to make connection with the world. And she has this excessive, and I've said the whole time, I think he will heal once we can heal her. And so that's now piquing my interest even more that you said that she's used it in children with autism because their son is severely autistic. So very interesting. Now I'm definitely going to call her after this.
Because the polarity of the remedy is connection, disconnection.
Yeah.
And in our proving, the imagery of St. Francis of Assisi came up, It's a very religious remedy. I mean, it is, of course, it's a very spiritual, it's used in many religions.
The way that...
And actually, I have the note here, integration between the individual and the collective. And as per your case, religious rigidity and fundamentalist thinking.
Interesting, because all they play all day are like hymns, and that really calms this boy down, is this like spiritual type music. It's all they listen to all the time. These prayers and mantras and things. Very interesting. Is there any final message that you want to leave us with, Jane?
Yes.
Any message for our listeners out there?
I think that homeopaths and the practice of homeopathy has an enormous possibility for healing the difficulties, not only of individuals, but in society. Because even though problems go global or whatever, one person at a time healing very deeply really makes a difference. And so if we as homeopaths do our own work, connect with our own psyche in whatever way that we do that, because everybody is a bit different, and we're really sincere about our work, we can help tremendously. So
beautiful.
I just want to say that.
And you have a great website, janecicchetti.com. So that's CICHETI. And people can go and find out more there about, there's some information there on courses and things people can download and read up on, and homeopathy and symbols, and just under books and teachings, you've got all sorts of info. And it looks like the place that you send people to buy the book is through Dana Ullman's website, Homeopathic Educational Services. Is that the best place for people to buy the book, or is there a different place that you prefer? Because I always ask authors, because I know some places like Amazon and places like that give you very little commission. So I always try to ask the authors, where's the best place that's going to benefit you for listeners to purchase the book from that place?
But that doesn't really matter to me in terms of that. But what does matter is the best place to get it is where you can get it the easiest.
Okay, I like that way of thinking. Oh.
Yeah, because I don't know how you must have books online in Australia, right?
We've got one bookshop in Australia, which is really good. It's the Aurum Project, the bookshop. So if people in Australia just type in Aurum Project, but actually most of our listenership, more than 50% of our listenership is actually in America. So it's... good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then homeopathic education is good then.
Yeah, just homeopathic.com. That's Dana's. He's got a great URL. Yeah. Thank you so much for today, Jane. I really appreciate it. I have been so looking forward to our talk for so long. So it's just been brilliant to have you on. And you've been with me for so long. This book has, like I said, I've had this for at least 10 years and it's always been sitting there. And so your name has always been on my mind for a decade. So it's been an incredible privilege to actually get to speak with you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's great meeting you. Bye-bye.